You are listening to Proof Text, a Glossa House podcast exploring Scripture and all things related to it. New episodes are released daily. For more information, check out glossahouse.com and subscribe to our channels on Spotify and YouTube. Welcome and enjoy.
That's right, said the beaver. Poor fella. He got wind of the arrest before it actually happened and handed this over to me. He said that if anything happened to him, I must meet you here and take you on to... And here Beaver's voice sank into silence, and it gave one or two very mysterious nods. Then, signaling to the children to stand as close around as they possibly could, so that their faces were actually tickled by its whiskers, it added in a low whisper, "They say Aslan is on the move. Perhaps he's already landed." And now, a very curious thing happened. None of the children knew who Aslan was any more than you do. But the moment the beaver had spoken these words, everyone felt quite different. Perhaps it has sometimes happened to you in a dream that someone says something which you don't understand, but in the dream it feels as if it had some enormous meaning. Either a terrifying one which turns the whole dream into a nightmare, or else a lovely meaning, too lovely to put into words, which makes the dream so beautiful that you remember it all your life and are always wishing you could get into that dream again. It was like that now. At the name of Aslan, each one of the children felt something jump in its inside. Edmund felt a sensation of mysterious horror. Peter felt suddenly brave and adventurous. Susan felt as if some delicious smell or some delightful strain of music had just floated by her. And Lucy got the feeling you have when you wake up in the morning and realize that it is the beginning of the holidays or the beginning of summer. Welcome to the Christ and Classics podcast. This is Colton Moore and Devin Wilkins, and this is the third episode of the second installment of our podcast, wherein we're going to focus on the author, literary critic, theologian, philosopher C.S. Lewis, and primarily focus on his Chronicles of Narnia. We began with Michael Ward, who so wonderfully opened up this season for us. Last week's episode, Devin and I discussed, I think, what's turning out to be one of my favorite things I've ever read, The Meditation in a Tool Shed. The more that I read it, the more it's captivating me. And now, today, we kick off the Chronicles with the first one, The Lion and the Witch and the Wardrobe, despite what many publishers will say.
How many ands are in there?
The Lion and the Witch. Just two. Oh, there's one. Oh.
The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Sorry. Did I say The Lion and the Witch and the Wardrobe?
It's all right. It's all good.
Oh, wait. Show me that copy again. Just hold up that copy again.
1950. Yeah. This is. I think this is kind of the official version.
So is that the original? Is that like a? That's not a first edition.
50th anniveration.
Oh, okay.
But it's got all the original. I definitely recommend. It's got all the original. Illustrations in color.
Oh, in color.
And it's really thick. Really
pages?
Thick paper. Yeah, I love it.
But you have an original set, right? Like in the original order. It's not like the imposter's order of where it starts with magician, but you've got.
I believe all my sets are imposter order.
No, you got an older one though. It's in your living room, right? I've seen it. That old battered one.
We do have an old one in the living room, and that might, but
I think so.
I don't read that one because it's not nearly as nice.
But it's original.
well.
Oh, those are beautiful. That's
So
nice.
yeah, this is the 50th anniversary one, and I've reordered them.
Oh yeah.
From
Oh yeah.
and just cut the top off so that way you can
Oh.
easily just pull them out as you
Okay.
need.
Ooh.
It came like that, but I actually like it.
Yeah, oh,
I
nice.
was disappointed when I first got it, but then I like it now.
Yeah, we'll drop a link in the in the description below with the link to the 50th edition. Um, the Before we get started, while we're on this topic, the paragraph from which I just read is the first in the Lion, the Witch, and Wardrobe is the first time that the name of Aslan is mentioned in the book.
Mhm.
And if you read it, he says, quote, none of the children knew Aslan was any more. None of the children knew who Aslan was any more than you, the reader, do. There's just one little bit of evidence that's like, okay, this is our first introduction to Aslan. Perhaps this is the first book, and not only that, this is the first one he put on the market.
Yeah, there was not another one written at the time that this one was published. I don't believe.
Right. If you want a more extensive argument for why the
Treatment?
Lion of the
Yeah.
Witch is the first, you can go back to episode 1 of season 2 where Dr. Michael Ward discusses that. So,
should it be said that will we be referencing Ward much in our Ward's thesis as we discuss these, or is somebody safe? Who?
I don't necessarily think we have to avoid him. I mean, the fact that we interviewed Dr. Ward over his book Planet Narnia, which is right there in the background, just makes this podcast not safe for those who've never read Narnia before. But
Yeah, originally we were thinking we would go through all the chronicles and then interview Dr. Ward, but we got it the other way around, and it was awesome.
yeah,
and I
it
think
was wonderful.
we're gonna enjoy it, but reader beware.
Yeah,
or listener beware.
And quite frankly, I'm more interested in the questions we're trying to ask and answer, as it could benefit a teacher or a student of The Lion and the Witch. And quite frankly, I don't think a typical high school, middle school teacher is going to be expounding or elaborating on Dr. Ward's thesis as readily as, say, maybe a college course on Lewis might. But
when I taught high school, let's see, I did teach some Lewis, but I referenced Ward, especially when I taught through Dante's Commedia, or the Divine Comedy, which I took. Ward was a helpful kind of entry gate for me into. Do I have it here? No, I don't. Must be on my shelf over there. Anyway, into Discarded Image, because I don't think I'd ever read through the Discarded Image before, and that is Lewis's treatment of kind of medieval. Would you say medieval cosmology, medieval worldview?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, more academic.
Yeah. Well,
back to the book.
Devin, let me give us a summary, a brief summary, and I'll probably in the summary just briefly touch on as I go along some of the major themes that I'm seeing, and then chime in if you feel that I'm missing anything, and then kick us off with a question, and then we'll run with it for 25 minutes
we'll
or so.
See if your summary alters my question.
Maybe so. All right, so Lion of the Witch and the Wardrobe, you're plunged right into the middle of World War II, where London is being bombed, and you're immediately introduced to the Pevensey children, Peter, Susan, Edmund, and Lucy. And because of the war, because of the danger in the city, they are sent out into the countryside to stay in a large house, called a mansion, with Professor Kirk,
Wait,
And
what's the large house called?
a mansion?
I'm sorry.
A manor?
I'm playing.
A mansion?
No, I'm just playing with you.
I'm very confused. And so they're at this house, and it's a massive house with lots of rooms, lots of places for them to explore, and they're playing, and eventually, um, uh, they came across a room with nothing in it but a large wardrobe where you place your clothing, particularly coats and larger attire. And Lucy, but in particular, found that she needed to explore it. She found it, and she walked through it. And as the cinematic rendition, I think, does a really beautiful job of, she's feeling the coats, and all of a sudden she's not. She's feeling the coats and walking back into the wardrobe. And instead of finding the back of the wardrobe, she begins to feel trees and crunchy snow, and the temperature gets cold, and she finds herself in this whole other world. And she comes across a lamppost where she meets a mythical figure, a faun, Faun, called Mr. Tumnus. And Tumnus invites her into his home, where he offers her tea and cakes, and he begins to play the flute for her, which puts her to sleep.
Classic.
Yeah. And ultimately, he ends up confessing to her that he's been sent to kidnap any son of Adam or daughter of Eve that he finds, as ordered by the queen, or the White Witch. And long story short, he lets her go. She goes back into her own world, where her siblings don't believe what she's seen or what she's experienced. She's been gone for all day. Lewis didn't say how many hours, but we're left to presume at least 10 to 12, half the day, really. And she comes back and finds out that in her world, she's only been gone but a few minutes. And maybe I'm going too slow with all these details. But her siblings don't believe her. They think she's going crazy. Edmund, who we come to find is a pretty nasty, Lewis uses beastly little boy.
He is.
He's really nasty.
I kind of forgot how awful he was.
Really, yeah. Just think of a nasty, just malicious, jealous, bitter boy. He ends up finding his way into the wardrobe. And who does he see? He doesn't see the faun, but he comes into contact with the White Witch and her chief dwarf. And she offers him, well, she was about to kill him until he told her that he's got other siblings. And so she ends up telling him to go back into his own world and don't come back until he's brought his other three siblings, and he's pretty much seduced into doing this by the Turkish delight, which is has a magical incantation in it that will cause him to basically eat himself to death. He wants it because he
have you had a Turkish delight before?
Oh, it's delicious.
They're not what you would expect, though.
No.
The first time you have one, you're like, wait, this is I was thinking chocolate.
Yeah.
It's not chocolate.
Yeah, it's absolutely wonderful. Wonderful.
Yep.
I'm gonna speed up, Devin. I'm not gonna get too much into the weeds. We don't have a whole lot of time, and we're only taking one episode with this. But long story short, and help me out here, the Pevensey children all get into Narnia, and they realize that they're in a particular moral conundrum when they get there, because Tumnus, who basically saved Lucy's life, has been taken captive by the White Witch. And they get some help from this bird that leads them to
Robin.
A robin, yeah. Leads them to the beaver's house. And the beavers tell them about Aslan and from the paragraph that I first began this with. And the beavers are excited that Aslan is is back in in Narnia.
Mm-hmm.
And they eat dinner at the beaver's house in their beaver dam. Edmund escapes to go find the White Witch's castle, which she told him where it was earlier. And he ends up betraying his siblings and telling the witch that the siblings are here and they're at the beaver's house. And the witch sends wolves to go attack the beavers and to kill them and to find the sons of Adam and the daughters of Eve. Meanwhile, the beavers realize what Edmund has done, and they go find Aslan at the stone table.
Can I say something?
Tell me.
Because this is not, I don't think, going to jive with my questions. I just wanted to add a little. Man, their impulse is to go after Edmund to retrieve him from the White Witch. By going to her castle, Jadis's whatever, and the beavers say, "No, you can't do that. If you do that, it's forever. I mean, that is the wrong way to go. The only hope of getting your brother back is by going to Aslan himself. Aslan is the only answer." And it's one of those nuggets in the story that are actually all over the place. But one of those nuggets where you're just, oh man, that really communicates to me personally, about like all the, Lewis has this way of writing, and it easily translates to your own life, and in particular Christian life. Just, oh man, the only way is to, take it to the Lord as opposed to whatever manner I thought I was going to go.
Yeah, and even whenever they go to Aslan, their problem is solved in the least likely, least expected way.
Yeah.
So they meet Aslan, and you have all sorts of things that happen like along the way. Peter has his first battle, and you've got another little nugget where Aslan's like, "Clean your sword. Clean your sword after you just killed the enemy. Like, you're a king. You're a king now. Act like a king." And Peter is beginning to step into these shoes that Aslan has given him, and Lucy and Susan as well. Meanwhile, Edmund's with the witch, and the witch realizes what's happened, that the sons of Adam, the daughters of Eve, are with Aslan now, and she reminds Aslan of the deep magic before the dawn of time. What's that deep magic, Devin?
What is the deep magic? Well, the deep magic seems to be,
this is another little.
Sorry.
Go ahead. Sorry. I was just saying, this is another little nugget that helps us kind of understand our own world a little bit better.
Yeah. Do you have a passage you have in mind?
Oh, I don't think I've got it right in front of me. But like this deep magic that if a traitor, is found,
oh yeah,
in Narnia, like she says, oh yes, here we go. This is Jadis, the White Witch, to Aslan. Quote, "You at least know the magic which the Emperor," Aslan's father, Aslan's father, "you at least know the magic which the Emperor put into Narnia at the very beginning. You know that every traitor belongs to me as my lawful prey, and that for every treachery I have a right to kill." And then
it's almost like justice and natural law, and like those those things that stem from the Emperor Beyond the Seas character that his world is bound by, and she twists for her own ends.
Well, like
or tries to.
Beaver responds, and he's pretty feisty. He says, "Oh, so that's how you came to imagine yourself a queen, because you were the emperor's hangman, I see." And then Aslan says, "Peace, Beaver." And then he says, with a very low growl, "And so," continued the witch, that human creature is mine. His life is forfeit to me. His blood is my property." Now, what's interesting is that the emperor over the sea put into Narnia, she says, this law into the very beginning. It's like it's woven into creation.
The fabric.
That every traitor belongs to her. She's not a woman. Like she's not a son of Adam or a daughter of Eve. She's someone special, someone magical and rightfully powerful, as you see in like the magician's nephew later on. And so, if there's a traitor in Narnia, blood rightfully belongs to her. Like that's it seems to be woven into the fabric that she gets that blood, and that's a part of her purpose in Narnia.
Yeah.
And the fact that Aslan says, okay, you're exactly right. And you're in fact, the blood that you'll get is better than Edmund, this little traitor. It'll be mine. And he offers himself up, and she forgets the deeper magic that happens when a sacrifice is made.
Right.
And that's beautiful, because you said at the very beginning of this, like you take this to the Lord, to Aslan, and he fixes the problem in the least likely way by dying for his people.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you ready for a question?
Yeah, we didn't summarize the rest of it, but
do you want to say the rest?
Oh, the witch's power ends. Her rule and reign is weakening with Aslan's growing power and presence. Ultimately, it's crushed by his death, and he begins to breathe on and to deliver the stone creatures that she had turned into stone. And he brings his army of reborn creatures to Peter, Edmund, Peter, Lucy, Susan, and Edmund, whom he is forgiven of his sin, of his errors, and his traitor, of his betrayal.
Yeah.
And he kills the witch, wins the battle at the end, and saves Narnia through his kings and queens by his death. It's a beautiful picture of the cross and the church.
Yeah. Yeah. It is beautiful. And yeah, I think my own appreciation of Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is just reaffirmed as I actually listened to it this go around. It's so good. I kind of, found particular joy in some of the later chronicles because they were less familiar, and this one I'd been exposed to the most. I think it was read to me in 4th grade by my teacher in public school. And it was, that was the first time I hadn't heard of it at home. And so it's been familiar to me for a while.
I read this first in seminary.
But did you see the movie before?
Unfortunately.
Yeah. So you were exposed to the storyline, and the first movie is the most faithful movie.
Oh yeah, the other ones I get pretty strong opinions about.
Oh yeah, don't get us started.
Don't.
But anyway,
all right. What do you got?
Yeah, so if you have this edition, I was thinking page 19. So very, very much toward the beginning, chapter 2. And I don't remember if Dr. Ward said something along these lines, or if I've read someone else along the way who asked a similar question. But as I came upon it again, I was thinking, I think I want to go down that road with Colton because I don't remember the road very well, but I think there's a lot of possible, a lot of potential in asking this. Let me just go to, let's see. So page 19, about a third of the way down, or even before that, I'll back up a little bit. But what have you done? Asked Lucy. So this is when Tumnus has betrayed her. My old father, now, said Mr. Tumnus. That's his picture over the mantelpiece. He would never have done a thing like this. A thing like what? Said Lucy. Like what I've done, said the Faun. Taken service under the White Witch. That's what I am. I'm in the pay of the White Witch. The White Witch? Who's she? Why, it is she that has got all Narnia under her thumb. It's she that makes it always winter and never Christmas. Think of that. How awful, said Lucy. I wanted to camp out on that phrase, always winter and never Christmas, because I was thinking about it in advance a little bit about how Ward said there are 3 levels to the Chronicles, and it seemed to me that this is kind of the presenting problem in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, always winter, never Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
And it seemed, right off the bat, an odd thing to say in Narnia, considering that, as far as we know, there is no Christmas in Narnia. Christmas is an Earth holiday. And so mainly I wanted to explore the phrase, always winter, never Christmas. Why is that appropriate or effective for, for us as readers, but for the overall project in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe for Lewis?
Winter seems to be associated with a kind of dreariness. Maybe dreary is not the right word. Certainly a bitterness, reflective of the cold, snow,
Death.
ice, death,
Mm-hmm.
perhaps mirrored a bit in the stone images that the witch turns creatures into.
Yeah, that's right.
And even in the season of winter in our world, it's associated with death. The trees go through the trees and the plants go through a kind of death. Grass turns brown, trees lose their leaves, only to be reborn in the spring.
Yeah.
So they go through this repeated cycle of death, right?
Resurrect.
But what humans look forward to, at least here in the West, who celebrate and did celebrate and have celebrated, is Christmas. Is when,
at least in the Northern Hemisphere.
Right. I'm definitely speaking in generalities and on behalf of many who live in a similar culture and climate as we do.
Yep. And as Lewis did. Yeah.
Yeah. And so Christmas is kind of the, we see in Narnia that Christmas obviously is associated with Father Christmas, Saint Nick. Mm-hmm. But for us Christians, there's like a birth within the death of winter. If winter is a death, there is the birth within death, which is the Christ of Christmas. And so, what's this mean for Narnia and the Narnians?
Can I add something?
Yeah.
Like death death in the Gospels, especially, is captured most clearly by, I think, the tomb. Right? Jesus is in a grave with a massive stone rolled over it, and for 3 days. And so, but all of our hope is bound up in the Lord of Life, who's been slain, being in that tomb. And I love how John 12 captures it, and Dostoevsky highlights this. But if a corn of wheat fall to the ground and die, it remains alone or abideth alone. But if it die, then okay, I'm messing it up because I'm trying to say it in the way that Dostoevsky said it, at least in translation. But the seed must die in order to give.
Yeah.
Sorry, I way cut you off.
No,
do you even remember where you were?
No, that's wonderful. No, I'm just thinking of there's the who's the poet that Lewis drew from? No. Was it a Lewis poem or a Shakespeare poem that was like Winter Path and
that was
Debt Forgiven?
Lewis's poem on the planets.
Yeah. And so like there's obviously this realm of like this idea of as the winter passes, so forgiveness flows. As the passing death, as death passes by, as winter ends, here comes the spring of rebirth and renewal, and forgiveness. And you see that in Edmund. It's like Edmund is like a little microcosm of Narnia. He's a little frozen death ball of bitterness and freezing malice. And he dies to that. Aslan kills it through forgiveness. And he begins to change just as the winter begins to pass and the snow begins to melt. So his bitterness and beastly character begins to melt. I've never thought of Edmund as a little microcosm of Narnia, but I can see it.
That's good.
And it sets the stage for future books. Whenever we get to the voyage, which is my favorite, because we have something similar that happens with Edmund and Aslan. Sorry, with Eustace and Aslan.
Yeah, just when you thought they couldn't be any beastlier. Yeah.
We've got to begin the voyage as the voyage begins. We just have to.
Okay. Yeah.
Anyways,
I think we
I know we're just spoiling. I couldn't help whenever we're going through the Iliad to keep talking about book 24.
Book 24. Only to have to talk about it by yourself.
I know. And I'll probably talk about the voyage backwards and forwards throughout all this trip through Narnia. It's my favorite.
Well, it's only book 3, so you don't have to
not too long.
Worry about spoilers after that. Here's a question though. So if it's always winter under Queen Jadis's reign, I get that. It's death. It's there's no vitality, no life. There's a reign of fear. There's no joy in Narnia unless it's maybe hidden, there are these prophecies that they're holding on to and sharing about 2 sons of Adam and 2 daughters of Eve, and stuff like that. But as Aslan is on the move, as Aslan's moving back into Narnia, you can tell, as you have already said, because the signs of spring start popping up, and Father Christmas strolls through, and various signs of joviality, as it were.
I was going to say, yep.
But here's so Christmas. It seems almost like there's an association between Christmas and springtime in this case, which I actually take to be Easter. It'd be like it's like always winter, never Easter. To me, would make a little bit more sense.
Mm-hmm.
Aside from the Jupiter imagery,
Yeah.
maybe
The Jupiter image within the character of Father Christmas.
Yeah. And yeah.
So the question is the image of Father Christmas associated more readily with wintertime or springtime? I see your point, because he does come out as the winter is passing. Whereas we typically think of Father Christmas as a character that comes in the very middle of winter,
or at least inaugurating it.
Right. Yeah.
So like winter solstice is mid-December.
Mm-hmm.
Late December.
So I'm just trying to think through. I've never thought of this question, so I'm thinking on the cuff here. So I'm thinking of what happens with Father Christmas and the children. Well, he prepares for them warm food and drink, and he gives them their iconic gifts: swords, sword for Peter, bow and arrows, and a horn for Susan, the magical healing vial for Lucy, and a small dagger. Nothing for Edmund, because he doesn't deserve anything.
He gets a coal.
Yeah. And so is there an association with like, what connection can we envision between the passing of winter, the forgiveness of sins, and the giving of gifts and feasting? That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too.
Particularly like gifts, feasting, and forgiveness. Because, I mean, we're kind of throwing these images all together, because the passing of winter, the forgiveness of Edmund's sin, the giving of the gifts, and the jollity of Father Christmas. Well,
as you piece that together, go ahead.
You have the forgiveness of, like, and I'm drawing in from the New Testament. You have the forgiveness of sins at the cross through Christ's death, like Aslan, or Aslan like Christ, rather. But also the imparting of gifts, the Spirit. I'm not saying that Lewis intends all these connections. I'm just trying to make.
Yeah. It's not direct allegory.
No. But there's something, the giving of gifts to by Christ, the feasting that comes. There's some connection there, but like with the Lord's Supper.
Yeah, I wonder. This may not come out right, but I'm wondering if this could help. So, always winter, never Christmas, but it's still wintry. Father Christmas comes, he gives gifts and prepares them for the hope to come. Aslan is not, quite appeared yet, even though he's on the move, and that's kind of what Christmas is about, right? The hope of the Messiah is on the move, and you've got, rulers of this world, some of them coming to worship him, others attempting to kill him to the point of genocide, right? Or infanticide, what happened? Yeah. So, maybe it does work. Maybe Father Christmas showing up, early-ish, and he's kind of almost John the Baptist like, preparing the way for the Lord, preparing the way for the coming Easter at the end. Because by Jove, Jupiter also has the red spot. He's He's also pierced for our transgressions.
Mm. Yeah, that is interesting. Ward makes it clear in his book that the jovial images within the Lion and the Witch and the Wardrobe, and even the mythological images that you see throughout the entire 7 Chronicles are just the vehicle, the means by which the Christ image is communicated, and the means by which the Christ image is hidden, in a sense. Or perhaps it's the other way around, that Christ is more obvious than the mythological clothing.
Seems like the mythological clothing allows the Christological realities to go down deeper. Like, whoa, this goes deeper than what I thought.
Devin, what would you say? What would you say to the person who is quite put off by somebody who says that, or quite put off by Lewis drawing from pagan, idolatrous gods and using them as a vehicle to communicate the gospel through 7 children's stories? Are we indoctrinating our children to worship false gods? Is Lewis wrong? I mean, you and I live in the Bible Belt, where that sort of argument occurs often. People hear things like, "Oh, Zeus, Athena, idolatry." Could be. Or they hear things like, "Oh, Harry Potter, witchcraft." Bad news. What do we?
But if it's on TV, our kids can watch whatever it is.
Wow. What would you say to that person? What would you say to that person? Like,
well,
yeah.
I mean, certainly not anything and everything is necessarily good for your children, our children. But I think you and I made this same argument, and largely on Lewis's coattails, I think, for reading the Iliad. Why should Christians read classics? And we talked about, well, first of all, Colossians 1, how God in Christ created all things. And all things kind of bear witness to him. And you might go, yeah, but what about other religions? I mean, that I understand creation, but religions? And then we went to Acts 17. How Paul is basically saying, look, you worship an unknown God. And I here declare to you who he is. And goes for the gospel. And I basically kind of boils down to other worldviews still inhabit the same world. They might view the world not entirely correctly, but in a Romans 1 sense, they can perceive God through the things that he's made, his invisible attributes and so on. And so the mythology is not perfect, but I'm trying to think how Lewis expresses it in some of his other writings. It's escaping me at the moment, but basically participates on some level. And Lewis talks about there being like a dying God consistently through all these mythologies. And It's the Christianity is the this is the one that you don't. I was gonna say the one you don't like, the one that you'd like to flip on its head or something like that, right? But
the myth made fact.
Yeah, so the myth made fact.
Mm-hmm.
That myth participates in truth, and the incarnation is from the perspective of the pagans. The myth is coming to its final culmination in reality, fact, as opposed to
And in the inverse, like we, our lives from God's perspective are more like a myth. So we could equally say the fact was made myth. Like we're the story. We're in this story that God is writing, this myth, if you will. And he comes into the myth and becomes a man. But from the perspective of the Greeks and the Romans, who are longing, Paul says, for the thing, it's like their myth has become fact. And so from both perspectives, I think we're hitting at the same thing, because God is the fact of all facts. Our facts are just his myths. Our facts are true in a really real objective sense, but relative to who he is, they are more mythological than he is from the Greek perspective.
Yeah, I mean, it can get a little like, whoa, meta. But I think that at least Lewis's idea is you have this longing that's consistent through pagan mythology, that strangely enough, there are strands in that longing that are pretty consistent. And what is this? And Till We Have Faces really goes after this hard. Which I commend to all. It's very good. But the that myth across time and space, in all of its diversities, but there's a singular strand that's, Lewis would say, has become fact in the incarnation, and that's why we can take hope in, well, yeah, sorry.
Oh, I thought you were going to say, and that's why, my friends, we can read the Chronicles of Narnia.
Well, yeah, and I mean, and I think Lewis includes a lot of that stuff because he was a medieval scholar, and the medievals were basically approaching, they were appropriating the myths of other worldviews, but seeing everything christened, like everything is baptized in light of the truth. And so,
yeah. Well, Devin, we got to wrap this thing up, and
it's a little long.
Well, that's okay. I just want to say that this is an example of, like, this conversation is an example in my mind is of what Jacob Klein spoke about in a short little speech he gave back in the 70s, which is phenomenal, which is an attempt at a Socratic dialogue, an attempt at a conversation led by questions, does not necessarily have as its aim to answer all the questions with a definitive confidence, so much as it does to expand our horizons. I've never thought of Edmund as a little microcosm. I've never thought of Narnia, rather, and I've never thought of the connection between Father Christmas and the passing of winter. Now, did we talk about the specific roles and of Father Christmas and nail that down? I don't think so. It's still a little foggy in my mind. but it's less foggy, and I've opened up a new door that I've never opened up before. And that's the whole point of education, is you got these doors, and it's like, okay, oh, I've never opened that door. Well, if I want to go in that door, I know where to go now, right? And sometimes you go all the way down it and you come back, and sometimes you just leave it open and just kind of gaze through the threshold. And right now we've just kind of opened it up and we're gazing through it like, wow, that's a pretty cool room.
Yeah. And
what's in there? If we,
I'm thinking that maybe that's all we'll really be able to do as long as we're discussing whole books in one podcast. But yeah.
Well,
yeah. And there are all kinds of other things we could have talked about, like how, when Peter and Susan are wondering who they should trust, Lucy or Edmund.
Yes.
When they're talking to the professor, that conversation.
It's so good. It's one of my favorite ones.
Yep.
Either she's lying, she's crazy. You might just have to believe her.
Yep. And then he concludes that conversation with, mind your own business.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah. Anyways.
Yeah, it's good. Well, we definitely spend a lot more time with the Lion of the Witch, but I think we're gonna call her quits for tonight. Gotta get to bed.
Yes, sir.
And we'll pick up next week with number 2 of the Chronicles, Prince Caspian.
The OG number 2.
That's right, Prince Caspian. Yeah, it's a good one. It's a good one.
It is. It reminds me of our world.
Yeah.
What's that
All right,
sound
man.
I heard? Is that music?
Micah, take us away.